So today's service has likely already preached to many of you in many ways. And so I was really planning to keep my words super short and just tie everything together. But I realized there was some particular things that I need to add to this conversation on this topic about the body not being an apology. And so y'all gonna bear with me. We're doing good on time. So as a trans person, some folks might understandably assume that any struggle with my body maybe began with feeling born in the wrong biological sex. But that wasn't it for me. For me, it started long before I considered myself non-binary. It started as a dark-skinned girl, child growing up in Miami, Florida, carrying all the projections and exotifications that were laid over me. I mean, some of y'all might have heard of this thing called bedroom eyes, and I don't know what that means on a child's face. Or labels like being called fast for just having a body that had curves. And so my struggle began from being born into a world that had already made its mind up about what my body parts meant. Before I was even 10, that message was so loudly embedded that nobody had to say much explicitly. It was in the fit of girls' clothes versus boys' clothes, in what got featured in commercials and magazines, in the offhanded comments about what counted as good hair. It bothered me to be called pretty for a dark-skinned girl. And at the time, with the length and texture of the hair that I had, people would say I must be mixed with something, as if my beauty needed an asterisk, a footnote. I absorbed all of this as some kind of standard that I must need to learn how to keep it cute so I can not land on the wrong side of it. And so eventually I came to do what wounded people do, and I went looking for a way to make peace with the body that the world kept reflecting back to me had a problem. So I won't regale you with every chapter, but I'll share some of my most visible and permanent ones, my tattoos. So they didn't start as art for me. They started as a prayer that I didn't have words for yet. I marked my body part by part, reclaiming territory that had been occupied by internalized loathing. This spot on this thick and lumpy thigh at the time was mine. I'm gonna put some art on it and love it. This arm can be flabby or fit. Either way, I'm gonna bless it with some art and declare it's mine. Each tattoo became me trying to write love onto a surface that I had been deceived into despising. And then life, it kept testing how deep this love went. How many of y'all have heard of alopecia? I was a teenager when all of the cute hairstyles started pulling out my edges. And then I became at the time, striving to be happily heterosexual married woman in my 20s when doctors said that stress was causing my hair loss in ways that I could no longer cover. And at the time I panicked because I'd swallowed up that lie that a woman's hair was her crown and glory. So what was I gonna be without my crown? I shared these parts of my journey of learning to love the vessel I'm in, not because I think my story is special, but because I suspect some version of my truth might live in you too. When I shaved off my hair, some of my friends thought I might be sick beyond stress. I was like, no. My life had just turned the page again, and I come into myself as a masculine of center stud at the time is what they was called. And at that time came fresh projections in men's clothes. And later, add testosterone, and for me came adult acne and fat redistribution to more belly fat, and embarrassing as it is to admit, came this fear of being seen as an unattractive, balding man with too soft of a voice to fit in. The standard had moved, but at the time I was still chained to it, still trying to clear a bar that kept rising, that kept changing shape, that kept whispering, not enough, not enough, I'll never be enough. Please know that in this present moment, I am extra healed from all of that. Yes, yes. But I want to be honest about how low it got for a time. My sense of being unlovable led me down this rabbit hole of internet searches where I landed firsthand in those incel spaces that were named, those involuntary celibate communities that were mentioned earlier. These are a real thing. And when I visited those waters, it was before I understood what they were. And church, this is what I need y'all to hear. Congregation, I need y'all to hear. Because what Mark just read from the Bell Hooks book, that pain that was referenced is the same pain that I noticed there. The despair that I felt as a little girl that made me feel like she had to fit into someone else's mold, the despair curdling in some of those men made to feel undesirable, that same self-loathing grows from the same poisoned root. The system that taught this little girl from Miami to apologize for her body is the same one that's teaching lonely men to hate women that they believe that they are owed. It's the same system. And just in case you think that this is just my old private story, please allow me to share that researchers trace now this vicious cycle running through our screens, this appearance anxiety. It feeds social media that feeds further loneliness, and then it feeds back around again and again. And y'all, in this research, they found that young boys as young as 6 and 8 are already believing that their bodies should be thinner than they are at 6 years old and 8 years old. And people think that this is just little girls who have these issues. No. This system of oppression, it gets installed somewhere earlier, and it doesn't spare anyone. Lookism is not a women's or a girl's problem. It is a human wound that impacts us all. The patriarchy demands that we all engage in self-mutilation, some turning the blade inward as shame, and some turning it outward as resentment. I name all of this because I wager that you've worn or maybe know some version of this too. Maybe not my exact story, but maybe a version that frowns or flinches in the mirror, or frowns or flinches at someone that you see walking by, or hides this feature that you've been taught to be ashamed of. If that's you this morning, please know ain't no shame in it. We are all on our own journeys and our own bodies. Ain't no judgment here. Sonia Renee Taylor says, liberation is the opportunity for every human, no matter their body, to have unobstructed access to their highest self. Liberation is for every human to live in radical self-love. So how does anyone get free? I would love to tell you that a single morning of grace and a single read of this book by Sonia Renee Taylor, it did it for me and I was healed. It was a really great book, but it didn't happen in one read. It was a slow process for me. For me, it began in a Buddhist community where daily chanting and meditating while focusing on a mandala and then sitting silently, that helped me to reorient my inner sight. And it happened for me in all places, in Korea, which I say with so much love because many people know that Korea is considered a global epicenter of lookism. It's a place where the pressure of that gaze is industrial. There, surrounded by all that perfecting and ranking and measuring of bodies, it just broke open in me, and I sought refuge in my first Unitarian Universalist community online through the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I don't know if y'all had heard about this community online. And through them, I started participating in their community gatherings, and they helped to nurture my spiritual and emotional inquiry as I started tracing and untangling this whole web of racism and colorism and sexism and transphobia and lookism and fat phobia and classism and ableism, all of these isms. I now had a community to help me unpack them, seeing how every one of these oppressions interlocks and feeds the other. I started looking for pathways for deeper study, which eventually for me became seminary. But before I got to start seminary, I started building this curriculum called No More Curarchy. Have y'all heard this word before, curarchy? Curarchy is a word coined by feminist theologian Elizabeth Schussler Firienza in 1992, and it names their interlocking hierarchies of gender, race, class, and ability, where one person can be oppressed in some areas and privileged in others. This word builds on the teachings of the word intersectionality, which was coined in '89 by Kimberly Crenshaw to show how Black women specifically were facing racism and sexism at once, and these were often overlooked by feminist and anti-racist movements. So they build off each other. But what I learned while I was teaching myself these things and building this curriculum, it finally helped me understand the thing that set me free. That in all of those years, I hadn't actually seen my own body, not once at that time. I had only seen through their eyes, the lens of patriarchy that profits off of my self-hatred. Every time that I frowned at myself in the mirror, that frown wasn't mine. It was installed. It was the gaze of the system looking through my eyes and hating me with my own face. How dare it? How dare it be so insidious? And the moment that I understood that, I could do the most radical thing available to a body taught to apologize. I could change whose eyes I saw myself through. That's exactly the work that Sonia Renee Taylor lays out. Before you can even begin radical self-love, she says you have to make 3 pieces, P-E-A-C-E-S, 3 pieces. First, you got to make peace with difference, period. As you use, we value pluralism, so we should know some things about making peace with difference. And that's difference with others, with so many things in the world. Got to make peace with difference. Then we got to make peace with not understanding. Ooh. We be wanting to figure some things out. That's harder for us UUs. We want to figure some things out. My body, I was able to do this yesterday. What did I do in the in-between that makes it, we got to make peace with not understanding the differences as they occur. And the third one is making peace with our own bodies. So it's making peace with difference, usually outside of yourselves, making peace with not understanding outside of yourself, then inside your own body. Because this is the part that Brene Brown draws out in the podcast that she has, and you can look it up if you're interested in going deeper. Brene Brown and Sonia Renee Taylor, this podcast. And she says that if you see difference in general as bad, then every way that you are different, you will also see as bad. She says that, and the way that you see the rest of the world as different will be bad too, and then you're right back on that ladder of systemic oppression, forever climbing out of a bad body towards a better one. And every time we slip into that comparison, she says we become a cog holding up oppression. I want to get out of that. That was my turn. So my body dysmorphic didn't heal when my body changed. It healed when my sight changed. When I freed my eyes from their eyes, when I stopped asking the question that patriarchy planted, what more do I need to buy to make me feel fulfilled? What more do I need to have to make my life beautiful enough to be happy, to love it? I stopped asking and started asking, what would it mean for me to see myself the way the divine loves me? To be unapologetic in love of self and community as one. And so I close by asking you, when did the world first tell you something about your body was wrong? How old were you? What was the one part of yourself that you've been taught to apologize for? Whose eyes have you been seeing yourself through? Really? Sonia Renee Taylor told us this morning that the body is not to be prayed for, is to be prayed to. What would it mean to regard our bodies as deity? To hold each other up as sacred embodiments of God as we truly are?